I've never voted. One guy asked me, Ike, why haven't you voted? I understood very well 1994. We are not voting for decision makers. We are voting for puppets, people who are going to be pushed around by lobbyists, by multinationals. There are people who are running this country. The Jan van Riebeeck concept, narrative. Jan van Riebeeck never existed in real time, real history. It's a figure that was made so that we blame the Dutch people. Coca-Cola funded Hitler. Fanta Orange funded Hitler. Kodak Film funded Hitler. I wish the Madlanga Commission can go beyond, like the state capture. When you talk about the state capture, even calling these ANC buffoons mafias is an insult to mafias, because mafias, they've got a code. Mafias, they don't violate their own people. When it was called Monamatapa, people were playing in Dongama Diamond, but they created a shortage in the system. They went to Hollywood. 1938, for the first time, the engagement ring was produced. Before that, there was no engagement ring. And then we started seeing producers writing into their films. A guy will kneel down on one knee and say, will you marry me with this ring? And they came up with James Bond movie that says diamonds are forever, to create that false need. Sanibonani Makhaya, live with Ike and back again this week. A lot of things are happening inside the country, and we've got Abo SIU and raiding houses of the entrepreneurs. We've got the Madlanga Commission, we've got the Ad Hoc Committee, Mkhwanazi giving his testimony to committee. We've got court hearings, Abo Katiso, Abo bail. There's so many things happening in this country, and sometimes I get bored, especially following our commissions. We've been having our commissions after commission after commission. And I can tell you, South Africans, they like these trending topics. And then from there on, back to square one, Kaizer Chiefs versus Pirates. And I can tell you what's going to be happening in Madlanga Commission. Some of the witnesses, they'll be coming in, testifying, and everybody will be saying, yo. They mention Natim Tetra, and people will say, yo. Maybe they'll mention another minister, yo, and then we forget, we move on. And for me, I feel with our commission, like I've said in the past, we need the NPA to prosecute. We need people to investigate. Unless they're telling us within the SAPS, we don't have those people anymore. Because our commission for me is a waste of money. And if you have a prima facie case or evidence against someone, arrest this person. I mean, the SIU, they've been taking our assets of the people. It means that there is a prima facie case, unless they're telling us something else. We've seen them taking izinto zikaMamkhize, Sean Mpisane back again. We saw some of the things back again. So I wonder, when they take these assets, they're taking them having enough evidence. Are they saying the guy didn't do the job and therefore he took the money as it is? I don't know. But I get bored, I'm a commission, because they make my recommendations and then nobody follows through my recommendations. And it seems as if the terms of reference sometimes are tailor-made to suit specific individuals, to exclude others. Like we've seen in a state capture, evidence that was led against Ramaphosa, it was all ignored. In the Madlanga Commission, it was even worse, because the terms of reference, they were saying they must make no findings against ministers or cabinet ministers. It was there in the terms of reference. So, and then what are you doing a commission for? And for me now, even now, I listened to Mkhwanazi. He went to the Ad Hoc committee or the portfolio committees testifying, and he pulled back on certain evidence. He was saying if he were to unleash this evidence, the country will burn. And sometimes I wish that evidence, it can come into the public. I don't think that the country will burn. South Africans at the moment, they don't have, that taste, to burn anything. They just want to go on with their lives, watch Chiefs and Pirates. Sometimes we need to know and follow the money, and we know Ramaphosa may be implicated. We know Senzo Mkhwanazi is implicated, but I'm more interested in people behind them. rather than the ICE boys. For me, that's why I've never voted. One guy asked me, Uguti, Ike, why haven't you voted? I understood very well, 1994. Uguti, we are not voting for decision makers. We are voting for puppets, people who are going to be pushed around by lobbyists, by multinationals. There are people who are running this country. There's a Zionist mafia from 1652, people who own Nabo dromedaries, people who owned multinationals like Dutch East India Company, and the people, they've got this fallacy. Uguti, there is white monopoly capital. I've always disputed that, even when the EFF and the RET, the MK saying, we've got a white monopoly capital. South Africa doesn't have a white monopoly capital. They have a Zionist capital, which has been ruling us for ages. And this capital evolves with time, like it has done in the past, included Abu Rupert, Abu Ernest Hoppenermas. These guys, when they left Europe in Germany, fleeing after the war, they converged and reconstituted themselves. They named some of the companies as Anglo-American to reflect the victors. But some of them, they were still Nazis. Some of them, they were still German Jews. That's why if you go to the 80s, the 60s, 70s, the people who were controlling economy as South Africa, it was the Jewish people who came from Germany. Some, they changed the same names, like we have seen in America. Abanye bazibiza abo Lopez, they owning abo Hollywood, they captured Hollywood. And what I like about them, they write books, they brag about that empire of their own, where they brag about taking Hollywood from the Irish, where they take Las Vegas. Boxers, you had to have a mafia. Uguti backpit against this guy. If you're not gonna have a mafia controlling you, like about Marvin Hagler. Marvin Hagler found his path very painful. That's why Marvin Hagler hated Sugar Ray, because he felt good to Sugar Ray is the darling of these Jewish mafias. Hence, for him, it took him a long time to get recognition. About Frank Sinatra, about Las Vegas, they were owned by these Italian mafias, and it's happened that way. And these guys, by virtue of owning Abu Hollywood, this is what they do. They front the Italian mafias. The Italian mafias are a bunch of guys who came to America. Some, they came to South Africa as prisoners of war, like Abu Greeks after World War II. They were poor. And some of them, they come from Sicily, and they had to find ways because the means of productions were closed for them. The people who were owning, they did not allow them. But people don't speak, Uguti. The Jewish mafia was always behind them, because now you're talking of cartels, people who own Abu Yuzari, people who've had the ownership of Europe for 1,000 years. The Zionist mafia, they were not allowed to run anything in Europe. If you watch a movie like Papillon, I'll come back to it. But these are people who've been expelled in more than 200 countries. They were expelled in Germany. They were expelled in Russia because they wanted to capture the central bank. They came and formed, the Bolshevik Revolution. About Stalin. Stalin was, half Jews. Lenin, all of them. They came in. About Trotsky. Trotsky was pure Jewish. That's why he refused to be the front. He said, let Stalin be in front because they won't accept me. Then they took over, eventually 100 years later, and they assassinated the royal families. But these are people who've been controlling us here. Even the Jan van Riebeeck concept, narrative. Jan van Riebeeck never existed in real time, real history. It's a figure that was made so that we blame the Dutch people for crimes that they did not commit, because in the 1400s, you have Abu Columbus being sent by Voyager trips or through Voyager trips by the guys who are owning capital. Because by now, the Zionists, they've got the finances of Europe. They tame the royal families of Europe. They send them to war. About Napoleon, they sent, by them. Hitler was funded on both sides. These guys, they were funding wars. Ford, they bombarded a company, Ford, in Russia, in Germany during World War II. He filed a lawsuit against America, was paid. Standard Oil, which was owned by the Rockefellers, it funded Hitler. Coca-Cola funded Hitler. Fanta Orange funded Hitler. Kodak Film funded Hitler. Siemens, Boss, today we like Boss suits. The SS, they manufacture those things. Siemens, all these companies, they funded the very same Nazis. They funded war on both sides. Metro Goldberg Mayer, they used to show prisoners, in Auschwitz chambers, films. And they vacated to America. When the Nazis went to Argentina, when they got to Argentina, they wiped all the black people out of Argentina. It was the Nazis. Argentina, probably it's 70 to 80% Nazi. This is where you find yourself. So we not identify it for what it is. Like now, I wish the Madlanga Commission can go beyond, like the state capture. When you talk about the state capture, you talk about the judiciary. That's part of the state. You talk about the executive. You talk about what's the other leg? It's legislature. That's a state capture, And these guys, it's not a mistake. When they emerge in the Caucasus Mountains of Europe in the 500 ADs, which makes Jewish mafia more dangerous. The Italian mafias, they're uneducated. That's why Bo Gambino, Bo Al Capone, Bo Charlie Luciano, they've been chased and found with ease. But the Jewish mafias, they don't go to prison. You don't hear them being televised in the news. Once you see a person, Katiso Mongol, that person is not a kingpin, because these ones, you don't know them. Where have you seen the open hammers? You'll never see the open hammers anywhere on TV. You'll see maybe their proxies, like, about Bob Hersov. These guys, they don't attend funerals, they don't attend weddings, public weddings. The only time we saw the open hammers, recently, people were shocked. It was Gajabutele's funeral, because he's one of their puppets. They went in there to pay their last respect, because the guy has served them. And the first time again, I saw Harry Oppenheimer is when Mandela visited him. He even told Mandela, which is going to vote DA. And that's when he came up with the concept of BEE, because Mandela was busy talking nationalization, because Mandela has been told, good, will nationalize. He went to America. He scared Americans, captains of industries, people who released him. So for me, to be part of the CODESA consensus, to have faith in commissions, to have faith in the electoral system, it's me buying into the Rothschild and the George Soros concept, the very same concept and philosophy that I rejected in Newtown in the late 80s when I was switching from the Charterist camp to the Pan-Africanist camp. I rejected that because I saw it for what it is. And today it's come, full swing. We are being governed by it. And the people who run this country will never find them. Actually, we'll be chasing Abo Ice Boy. We'll be chasing Bo Natim Turbo, Pegictele. But the real money, I'm talking about trillions. I'm not saying we must avoid the small monies, Boma Humela, related to Cyril Ramaphosa. They're important because what is more evil about them compared to the Italian mafias, and actually even calling these ANC buffoons mafias is an insult to mafias, because mafias, they've got a code. Mafias, they don't violate their own people. Mafias, they take from the system of the day and then give it to their own people. Like for me, I distinguish between a crime. There's a common crime, there's a petty crime. I'll give an example. When this guy Armstrong, who's a cyclist who won Tour de France, he defrauded Discovery. They said because he was infusing blood in his system and he won those races and he was robbing them. I said, hurrah, because he has robbed the robber. And for me, if you do a crime in Jalo where no citizens suffer, where he hits the private interest. But unfortunately, some of these companies, they push back their losses to the masses. But mafias, when they came in, these are people who are doing bootlegging, alcohol, which they're not affecting everyone. They were controlling the butcheries. Mafias, they didn't start with drugs. It's only now. And actually, they will execute you if you were dealing with drugs. They were pushing a parallel economy, because when people who are running the cartels, I call them the banking cartels, captains of industries, pharmaceuticals, they will come up with laws and say we cannot be dealing with ABC, and they'll craft laws. And the Italians, they said, hell no, we're gonna come up with our dark world, because this is what is happening. The cartels that are happening today, they are the ones who say, let us group ourselves in the pharmaceuticals, in the mining industry, in all the industries, and all else they must come through us. Like during COVID, we've seen African people could not even recommend Mkhwanazi, Izangoma, healers. They were pushed aside because these people have a monopoly. These are a group of people, even at universities, they group themselves and say, if you don't have a certificate, you cannot come in. And then you ask yourself, the first person who got a degree, who gave him a degree? The person who gave him a degree didn't have none. These are people who say you cannot speak on religion, you cannot speak on this. But all of us, whether you're Africans or Australians, we are born innate with those gifts, and they are passed on from generation to generation. Hence I say, everybody's a psychologist, everybody's a doctor. Yes, I understand somewhere there must be a gatekeeping for safety, for regulations, but there are certain things. If somebody comes to you, my child wants to go to school, or my child has 10,000, how shall I invest it? I'll be able to have an opinion, of which I've also exercised financial, wisdom. If someone comes to me and say I'm stressed, I'll tell you, don't worry about little things. Handle these things 1, 2, 3. I've been a psychologist. If someone comes with a spiritual problem, I'll solve you. If you come with health problem, if you collapse in front of me, I'll be able to do something. I can put in water and say fresh air, those things that I know. But unfortunately, when the people have captured the world, they will tell you cannot administer Mkhwanazi, you cannot administer Imbiza because it is wrong. And people, they've been surviving for centuries of years. They never had to wait for Western concept designed for them to live. So unfortunately, it is like that. You check the diamonds. The De Beers of this world, when they went to Lesotho, they found diamonds. They were everywhere at the surface level. They went to DRC. Diamonds are not rare, but they created a concept which diamonds are scarce. Diamonds are the girl's best friends. Diamonds are forever. And then they created a false value. They shrink the diamonds. They found diamonds in Australia. They captured that area, push everybody aside. In Zimbabwe, they find diamonds. They push everybody aside. They camp there because diamonds, they were found in DRC, when it was called Monamatapa, people were playing in Tongama Diamond, but they created a shortage in the system. And there was a time when people were not buying diamonds. De Beers, because they own the diamonds, monopoly in the world, and it's not by mistake. They capture companies, and capture countries, so that they all fall under them, using soldiers, using Britain as an empire. They went to Hollywood. 1938, for the first time, the engagement ring was produced. Before that, there was no engagement ring. And then we started seeing producers writing into their films. A guy will kneel down on one knee and say, will you marry me with this ring? And they came up with James Bond movie that says diamonds are forever, to create that false need. So it is those people who are captured, who have captured the world. Martin Luther King, when he was killed, Martin Luther King, first of all, they put this I have a dream speech, which is a good thing. He had a dream. But Martin Luther, for 2 years after they have a dream speech, he spoke about Vietnam, beyond Vietnam. He was opposing the Vietnam War. The Stokely Carmichaels, Nabumire Makeba, they went to him. They said, Malcolm X is gone. You are the one now is the representative of black people. Stokely Carmichael, before he became Kwame Ture, he said after listening to Martin Luther, after we bombarded him, he started to sound more revolutionary than us. We knew that he was going to die because now he was talking sanctions. There's a speech that he makes when there was a union, a protest, a union, I don't know, I can't remember. There were sanitation workers. They were protesting. They were on strike. He went there to deliver a speech. He said, don't buy Coca-Cola. That's when he became more dangerous. And he even mentioned a bread company. And then he says, Jesse, Konja, what's the name of that company? Jesse Jackson was there. And Jesse tells him, that's when we knew that Martin Luther King is going to die. So for me, these commissions, if they're not going to address that, who owns us? Who owns the politicians, the ANC? Who owns Ramaphosa? Who owns Patrice Motsepe? Who owns Saki Maqozoma? Who owns Tokyo Sekhwale? Who owns Abozile? We know that DA, it's a party that was founded by miners. That is captured there. Abozek DBA come from there, from Bobo PFP, and before that, I forgot the names, what it was called. It was established purely to safeguard the interest of the miners. Hence, today, DA, they will always side with Israel. They will never move away from that. They have the capture of their own. So for me, until we address those things, who captured the judiciary? Yes.
I just want to know, when you say Zionist, you mentioned Nazis somewhere in there. Are there any Zionist Nazis? Because other people may find that to be a conflict.
It's not a conflict. I'll tell you what. As much as the propaganda of this world is pushed, I can look up and down. As much as the propaganda of the world is pushed, we've got Nazis in the army who supported Hitler. Unfortunately, when you say that, you are being cancelled. And I will tell you this, and without any shadow of doubt, Mangiti, during World War I, of which it's not a world war, it's a European war where they involve everyone, because we had no beef against Germany or Russia or whatever, but they involved us anyway because we were colonies. The world defeated the wrong enemy. This is a guy who is a white hope. All the films, when you look at the films, there's a film called The Great White Hope. And the Great White Hope, even in real boxing, there was Gorikuni, who fought against Muhammad Ali, fought against Larry Holmes. He fought against lots of people. This guy, he was modeled as a white champ because at that time the world was dominated by black champs. But Jack Johnson was the first black champion. But Joe Louis, they wanted their white hope. This guy was failing. And then comes, who's the other boxer? Tommy Morrison. It's not just boxing. As much as you see King Kong climbing mountain, and the King Kong is, defeated at the end. King Kong represents a certain people, represent a certain interest that you can conquer you. And the white hope was Adolf Hitler because he was standing for his own people. He's related to the English. He's related to the Russians, the first Russians, not the Bolshevik. That's why I kept on saying, I don't want to attack England or Poland because we are of the Irish, is it? Yes, that race. I don't want to fight him. He kept on sending letters to Churchill. And, and the Zionists, the financiers, because they were on both sides. These are people who are always on both sides. Like I've mentioned earlier on, most of these companies that I've mentioned, they've got a trace of the Zionist mafias, the cartels, Kodak, Metro Goldberg, funding Hitler during war. The Rockefellers, they funded Hitler. Ford, they funded, Ford, though is not Jewish. So there's always that, a synergy. So when they defeated the guy, he was the white hope. But they depict him, in boxing matches because the Jewish at that time, they were taken to be black, like the Spanish, like the Portuguese. And their last stronghold that they had, Gakule Europe, it was Spain, Nabo Portugal. So they saw them as the blacks of Europe. So it has always been this conflict. Remember, these are guys who are not allowed to trade in land because they had no land of their own. That's why they always wanted their own promised land. There's a book that I forgot where they say they wanted Brazil as the promised land. They wanted Uganda. They ended up with Middle East because it has that historic tie. And I will come back to that historic tie of the chosen people. So I wanted to say, look at a movie like Papillon. These are people, eventually, they found a way to use money, the monetary, currency. I want to say the currency, to move goods. And eventually they ended up owning banking. They ended up owning insurances. He who came with no land ended up owning land, ended up enslaving the youth of Europe. That's why the youth of Europe, they did not volunteer and say we are going to Voyager trips, because back in the days it was dangerous. It was like going to the moon. They didn't know what to find or what they were going to find in Africa, in Australia, in Americas. So people were criminalized. If they saw you dumping a cigarette, in Europe, in the streets, you were criminalized, you were arrested, you were sent to colonies, like in the movie it's shown. And then you serve 10 years, in Equatorial Guinea. When it's finished, you start another 10 years as a colonialist. That's why the Afrikaners, they hated the communists. They kept on saying, we don't have a problem with the ANC, but we don't want communists, because these are people who came up with communism. Even in Russia, when they captured Russia, the Bolshevik, 100 years later, when they came back to return to assassinate the royal family of, Russia, they took over the central banks. They came up with all these concepts. So the mind of an Afrikaner who was sent here as forced labor, the memory is still fresh. That's why they always wanted to move away, from the Zionist capture, because they realized that when they were defeated in the Anglo-Boer War, they were not defeated by England. Yes, they were British settlers, but who captured them? By 1820, too late, the Zionists, the financiers, they're already in control of Europe. Hence, we find ourselves where these guys, they realize later, no, but ANC is not that dangerous. This is a civil rights movement. They just want to enter the same toilet as us, because ANC, it's a civil rights movement. There's nothing revolutionary about the ANC. And then they okayed it. And Nakhona, it was fast-tracked by who? The Oppenheimers. The Oppenheimers, they told P.W. Botha that, hey, release Mandela. Release Mandela now. And he suffered stroke. They brought de Klerk, release Mandela. They used to go to Lusaka, give these guys money. So the capture, it's bigger than we think. Maybe the day we follow what's in your fridge, maybe the day you worry. I normally say the jungle oats that you eat before it came out of the jungle. Who owned this jungle oats? And follow the money. If you use a makeup product, find out this makeup product, who owns it? The person who owns this company, Oil of Olay, which company, which is subservient of what, a holding company of that. You'll go back, maybe you might even find about Rock, what's this Rock Nation, about Vanguard companies, about Monsanto. That's why today, you look, what happened to the original chicken? Today you fry a chicken, this thing is wet forever. You burn it, it's full of water inside because it's chemically engineered, yes?
I'm going to bring it back right here, man. You've spoken a lot about conspiracy theories.
It's not conspiracy theories. Can I say this before?
I want to know, what do you think is the goal of these supposed, mafia that you talk about, which may or may not exist? Should they exist? What do you think their goal is for the average South African?
Sometimes I'm puzzled when people are saying the conspiracy theory. First of all, the term conspiracy in law, it is there. Most people were hanged. They face young bal because they said they conspired to murder. There was a crime called doctrine of common purpose in South Africa. You conspired. Before people conspire, they must have a theory. They sit down. People say, do you mean there are people who sit down and plan? Before you can commit a crime, you sit somewhere and you must have a theory how it's going to come out. If I'm owning a mine, you own a mine, and there's a government interest that is against us, threatening us, we're going to call ourselves whatever, cartel, be it, a group. If we own, the pharmaceutical companies, we're going to form and try to lobby the government of the day. That's not a conspiracy. That is happening. If I own a bank, and then the government that is not in favor of me come in, I'm going to try to influence the government of the day so that I get leverage. I'll give you an example. There was a time, I think it's the early 2000s, late 90s, where Coca-Cola, they said it was struggling to get the raw material. Most of the raw material comes from South America, our Coca-Cola. I know it's somewhere in Europe, they say they also mix beetroot, in the eastern part of Europe. But ours, we got the raw material from the cocoa leaves. There was a time when they were struggling to get the cocoa leaves. They said the taste of Coca-Cola is going to change because in the Colombia, Mexico, that region where they get the cocoa plant, they had rebels like Abu Noriega. People were no longer friendly to them. It's like if we have Patrice Lumumba saying you can no longer get a supply of this. What must they do then? They're going to sponsor another rebel movement like Mobutu. They're going to sponsor another rebel movement Maybe to take Pablo. If Pablo is threatening their interest, take him out so that you can continue to get the supply. How is that a conspiracy theory? It is true. If I come into South Africa, I become the president of South Africa, and then I said, as from today, or Botswana, you can no longer get the diamonds. All these diamond manufacturing companies, they're going to come together into a conglomerate and say, do you see Ike? What do you do with him? Do we remove him? And we've got books, people, bakhuluma ngayo, the hitman, was it the hired hitman? There's a book called, this guy was a hitman who explained how they moved, in Bolivia, how they assassinated people like Abu Allende, how they installed Abu Pinochet. It's true. We've got the mafias being used to assassinate Fidel Castro. During the era Kennedy, it was a scandal, it was embarrassing because Fidel Castro captured them, they admitted, and America had an egg in their face. The term conspiracy theory, it was coined by these guys. When you see their nonsense, you say we are conspiracy theories. And people think that when they say you're conspiracy theorists, they think that they've said something profound. It's like someone saying you're generalizing. They think that, no, you're generalizing. They think that they've said something profound. Statistics by nature, they are generalizing. When you talk statistics, you are rounding off things to the bigger number. It's not every number to the T. So that is that. I'm looking at you. So
I don't know how these conspiring guys, what do they have the effect on your average South African who's living in Johannesburg?
Can I ask you a question before you continue? If the guys, boy Jason, JCI, and all these companies that come up, DBS, Anglo-Americans, they decide to come together, and other companies who are trading all over the world, and they say, we think it's time to end apartheid. And the government of the Day of Afrikaners, they're not ready. They force P.W. Botha. He even suffers a stroke. They bring with de Klerk. Are they conspiring? When they do that act, coming together, are they conspiring? Let me bring you to America. If Donald Trump comes in, all these companies, they disagree with him. They come together. They say, you know what? We don't like this guy. We're not going to cooperate with his policies. All this tariff nonsense, and you must come back to America. Tina, we are exploiting the Chinese there. Are they conspiring?
I hear you.
And they have a theory to do that. They don't just conspire by coincidence. So when people say conspiration, people conspire because their interests are threatened. I'll give you an example. During COVID, soccer was not played. Multi-choice, they already paid PSL monies, billions. We want to see football. And if they're not seeing football because there's a lockdown, they're losing because they must advertise. And then what did Evan Khoza do with Kezam Taung? They pushed, they said the soccer is going to be played because it was going to mean that they must refund multi-choice. And then it did not want that. It was not in their best interest. They must pay players. They must run their admin. And then that's a conspiracy. They conspire. But however, conspiracy, it's been tarnished with, this negative connotation. We conspire.
I'm going to go back to the question. So you said the wrong victor won. Had the right victor won, how would the average South African's life look today as opposed to what it is now? Because clearly you're saying the people in charge of the ANC and everyone are the result that we're living today, right? Had the other victor won, your Hitler, your Reich, how do you envision that?
I don't have a crystal ball, but I'm simply saying at that time, what happened? The guy that we were told in history, guys like Idi Amin, the guy who was told, there was a movie, The Rise and Fall, where we told Idi Amin is a terrible guy. We found out later, Idi Amin was not that guy. The reason that Idi Amin became an enemy, he was humiliating Britain. He was the guy when the ambassadors from Europe coming in, he says, lift me. He humiliated them. They did not like that because Idi Amin, he was trying to restore the image of an African. I'll give you a guy like Jack Johnson. Jack Johnson, he had 3 white wives. At the time when it was not, allowed, he was chased like Puff Daddy. He ran to Cuba. He was brought back to America. This is a guy who never lost a fight. In his old age, was brought back to Cuba so that they can give him a young man who can beat him up in boxing to restore the status quo. That's what happened. And they said to him, Joe, you know that you're a fugitive. If you come back, we're going to give you amnesty. Come back, So That's what happens. When it comes to, I'm looking at you, when it comes to the world defeating the wrong enemy, at that time, you look at the interest. This guy whom we are told would hear the final solution. What is it that he wanted? This is the guy who was robbed. He felt aggrieved. World War I, Germany had lost 60 million Germans. They are poor. 500,000 invaders, foreigners. They've got the economy, lucrative positions, and these guys, they're introducing porn, they're introducing immorality that you see in Hollywood, they're introducing the Cardi B's of this world. And the Germans, they're Catholic by nature, and they were aggrieved and said, we don't know these things, we don't know prostitution, we don't know all these things that we are seeing, immoralities. That's why when Hitler came in, he introduced the animal rights groups, he introduced many laws, that are pro-human rights. And then when he came in, he was aggrieved when he won the elections. Some of their territories have been taken. There were Jews in Austria who were separated. Their land was taken. He just wanted a piece of his empire to consolidate his German empire. And then these guys, because they're always forming as an international cartel, like we've seen in South Africa. If you antagonize them here, we've seen in Zimbabwe. If we antagonize the financier here, they mobilize. Like they mobilized in World War I, to bring America. America was pro-German back in the days. Even during World War II, they told Churchill, we managed to bring America to the war. We can do it again. That's why they told Churchill, don't surrender, don't consider a peace. Hitler wanted, his action, that was what was happening. And the final solution, it was the Rothschilds. It is the wealthy. I've said it, I've been antagonized for that. I've been cancelled for that. The World War, it is the wealthy, super wealthy Jews who wanted Palestine. The Jewish families in Europe, they did not want to go to Palestine because they were established. They had everything going on for themselves. They created their 911. They created their October 7 moment. They created an emergency. We are being persecuted. We're not wanted here. They spoke to England. Give us Palestine. Give us Palestine. They kept on saying, give us Palestine. And Hitler said, no, it's fine. You'll find your money deposited that side. Go to Palestine. That's what it happened. And then they went to Palestine. And then for me, when you talk about Palestine, I don't take part in that debate because there was no Middle East in the past. It was East Africa before the Suez Canal. What happened in Argentina happened in Israel, in Jordan. The original inhabitants were removed. I'm listening to you.
Man, we love it. And we are loving the whole international exposure that you're giving to us. But as South Africans, we'd like to come back home, right? Since these guys have so much influence in your perspective, do you think that they had a hand in making sure that a white judge was assigned to preside over the bail and appeal of Katiso Molefe? Do you reckon that they are involved in the lawmaking?
You see, I'll tell you one thing. The international cartels, they don't concern themselves with trivia. I remember when Saddam Hussein was arrested, he says the lion don't concern itself with monkeys. Of what interest? Because I can tell you, on the surface level, when a bail is issued, there are things that judges, they must consider, and it doesn't matter the crime. And if those conditions exist, then they must release. Like for an example, before you consider a bail, remember a bail, you cannot use a bail to punish a person because you presume a person to be innocent until found guilty. And the freedom of movement is one of the fundamental rights. A bail, it comes as an urgent basis. It comes as an urgent matter. Which freedom of movement, you cannot subject someone, to imprisonment. What if this person is not guilty or is not going to be found guilty? So you are interrupting his life, his livelihood. So a bail is meant to facilitate a person must not be interrupted or must be interrupted as little as possible because this person has children. which we did not see on Opaf Day. This person, it must safeguard, his family, and therefore there must be a flow while he's attending a trial. Also, he must also be able to consult with his legal representatives. But there are circumstances that may render someone not be eligible for a bail. But you look at, can this person attend trial? Can we secure him? If it's a flight risk, you can't give him a bail because it's a flight risk. Then that disqualifies him. You look into your personal circumstances, whether we are Moses Itolo, we are Katiso, we look into your personal circumstances. Can this person attend the court the next time? And we look into, is he going to intimidate witnesses? Can he intimidate witnesses? Because we don't want to tamper with the evidence of the court. And you also look into the public interest. Someone might have decapitated the child's head. You look at the interest of the public, because the laws must be interpreted for the benefit of the public. What is the public outcry? The morality, of the crime, the sensitivity, the gravitas of the crime. You look into all that. The judge takes into account an evidence. Will you tamper with evidence? But there are other grounds that they look in, and then they release you, and then you come, then they convict you if you are found guilty. But you cannot use a bail to punish. The first thing would say, can this guy attend court without intimidating witnesses, without dealing away evidence?
But don't you think that there was some sort of collusion there? I mean, all his representatives were white. The judge was also white. Are you saying his bail was just? That's my question.
I try to stay away from these black and white issues, especially if I cannot stretch it further or substantiate it. This is what got to Anele, into trouble, because when you accuse a person, you must stand on solid ground. You eat white food, I drive a white car, drive a car that's not black. I'm not gonna be saying there's collusion. Like, there's so many things that are happening where there is white involvement, and some people, they believe, it's maybe if I get this lawyer, he's going to do the job. I don't know, who elected the judge. I know that the judge president, where was the matter head? Was it in Johannesburg or in Pretoria?
Johannesburg.
Yeah, I can't remember who's the judge president in Johannesburg. I don't know, but he's probably black. So he's probably has a hand in it. But yeah, so I don't know. I don't know much. I don't know which was the judge president in Johannesburg. I can't remember. But I cannot substantiate that. We've seen a Manyama case about ANC where you have a white lawyer, a white judge, no Jacob Zuma. So I'll stay away from that unless I can substantiate. But a bail, for you to get a bail, it's based on those conditions that I have applied. And if the state has a problem, they must appeal and then go to the higher courts, up to the constitutional court, if they are not opposing bail.
It's on record that Katiso Molefe is a flight risk. I mean, he left the country 150 times. How does somebody like that get bail if no collusion is involved?
He left the country to do what? Did he run away from the country, or he left on a normal visit? If you leave, like for an example, you cannot say a person is a flight risk because one day he went to watch Manchester in Old Trafford and then he came back. How is that a flight risk? If somebody went to Dubai, in a family and came back, it's not a flight risk. And even if a person is moving up and down, the courts have other alternatives or means. They can say, hand over your passport or stay away from witnesses. If we see you talking to witnesses, you call them, your bail conditions, who are violator, you'll be back in jail. They sometimes impose those conditions. Okay, you must sign twice a month or 2 times a week.
Yeah, there are conditions that you go to report to the SAPS in Morningside.
Yes, they'll put those conditions. But you know what? If you want to do ABC, contact or consult your investigating officer. You must know your whereabouts. They put those conditions, and I'm sure his lawyers, when they argue your matter, you put on those conditions. But we hear the state saying it's a flight risk. We're prepared to hand over or hand in his passport. We're prepared to, to satisfy you in that regard, to make you, rest, knowing this guy is not going to run. And then,
how trustable is the court? right, when it imposes these sanctions that you won't go to the witnesses, you will have your passport, how workaroundable are they? And number two, keep in mind, not only has,
Let me understand your choice. You said how trustable.
yes, and
How trustable is the court?
how trustable is the court's? Just because the court said stay away from your witnesses, does it mean that the person will stay away? Just because they took away your passport, does that mean you can't leave the country? I mean, Uketse has been arrested numerous times in Britain for drug trafficking and fraud. He's even served time.
They say God told Adam not to eat the forbidden fruit. He did that. So if people can defy God, so then is that a yardstick? And if a person has been convicted in Britain for whatever, and then you must bring it here, is it relevant? The same as when a person has been found in the misconduct in a company. You cannot charge a person unless if you want to use those collective acts to say this guy, he's a delinquent. He's perpetual. But if I've been disciplined because I assaulted a colleague, in a case of theft, you cannot use that and say it's a second offense of similar nature. It's not. Unless you're bringing another charge of saying, no, he's a delinquent. But if you're bringing a case of theft, you cannot say, no, I'm charging him with theft, but he also assaulted another guy. Unless you bring a case that's going to house all these issues, which is a delinquent, he beat somebody, he stole, he did this, he came late, but if you're not bringing a similar case, then those cases, they'll be separate. And I don't know what happened in those matters on foreign soil. Maybe, as a toll sack, or maybe convicted, he has paid his crime, because in our law, there's also something called double jeopardy, which means that I cannot be punished for the same case twice. It's the same as you put two, speed cameras. This is Yangshan for the same crime within a meter. You cannot punish me twice. So for the same crime that I've already paid for, so that is that. But it is for that. But as for a conspiracy, I don't know. I wanted to listen more to the judge. But I saw it, Gangane, and what I noticed is that the judge was reading the judgment. Something disturbed me. He was reading a comma and a full stop, of which is something that I've never heard. Because he was reading the statement and say comma, and then he reads and he says full stop.
Yeah. So do you say that the judge could not use his criminal history to caricature him, so that then base his bail on those conditions?
You can use the criminal history of a person to say he's violent. This is where it comes in. Let's say maybe you say he can intimidate witnesses. And the prosecuting team, they will say, no, you cannot be released. This guy, he's intimidating because of his history, or he'll intimidate witnesses. And remember, when you say so, the defense team, they're not going to sit down and say, oh yes, we know, he's killed people before. They're going to counter that. They're going to say, no. If you've got the concern about intimidation, put conditions on him. Put stiff conditions. To say he must report twice in court, his phone must be confiscated, or he must not make contact, he must not talk to them. Should he talk to them, then his bail conditions, as violated, will come into force, and then you'll forfeit his bail. You put those conditions, and the judge will weigh it through and say, okay, under the circumstances, let's give him a benefit of doubt. And taking into account, Ugoti, the freedom of movement is very important, because we come from an era where our courts, they look at the Mandelas of this world. They look at, the Rivonia trialists and say, no, we come a long way, the freedom of movement. And the bail itself, it's based on agency, which you must not interrupt, your life as much as we can. Yes.
I wanted us to touch on Shadrack Sibiya as well, but I don't know, is he also an ice boy?
Yeah, normally I try to stay away from the ice boy. Normally I like to go to the final, the guys, like, to be honest, the guys who I'll talk about Sibiya. The guys, like Mkhwanazi said, there is more. I'm interested in them more. When he said, if I can release some of the information, all of you here will be involved. I want to know, what does he have on Julius Malema? What does it have on Zille? What does he have on Ramaphosa? The public need to know that, and they will use the state security. Already we have no state, we have no soldiers, we have no police, we are on our own. The Czech mafias, the Cyprus mafia, they are running as they want. The Basotho nationals into mining. So what are you saving? You may as well tell us. They may as well come to the commission. Maybe the judge gave them amnesty and say, okay, fine, we need to know. I mean, I feel within South Africa, we need to know. Maybe we start 1994 or we start 1652. We need to know who owns what. Who did what, and people can come, but testify njengaku TRC, and people bathi for the sake of clarity, so that we know when I buy this chicken comes from the factory kaBhekicele, and Bhekicele bribes so and so to be eligible, so that I can make that decision. Unlike now, we even eating food that we don't even know where they come from, because some of the people don't want to be labeled. Some of the people, they're hiding behind other people. We need to know. We need disclosure. The same way as parliamentarians, they say if people have donated to you, we need to know, so that when you take certain decisions, we know, you're taking this decision because you are given money by Rothschild. Many of these guys, they work for Rothschild's companies, Tito Mboweni, Trevor Manuel, and the next thing, we are indebted to the IMF. We need to know, that's why they're enslaving us with the IMF. So, but people, if we're going to come, like they did, is it the Haifa Commission, the Spy Commission? George Bezos came and said, no, we cannot come and spill some secrets, because some of the people, they are late, and some of them, their families knew them to be comrades, and if they find out now that they were spies, it won't be good. We need to know. Some people need to know, what? I suffered because of these guys. And then they protected Bulelani Ngcuka, and Bulelani Ngcuka went scot-free because the state had the information which he was a spy or not a spy, and I still believe Bulelani was a spy, because now the Jacob Zumas, the Moshe, the Maharaj, they were left with no evidence to substantiate. That's why they had to probe the UNISA qualification, how he was allowed to register with UNISA, the passport to Zambia, and the imprisonment. Where was he in prison? When others were imprisoned or were arrested with him, they never saw him in a cell with them. And he went to Oliver Tambo back and forth, and he himself, he said the apartheid government knew of that. They allowed him to go. They gave him a passport, all those things. And when it ended, they say Bulelani Ngcuka was not a spy. Thabo Mbeki dismissed him, but it's not true. I've said it over and over again. The commission, when it ended, they say we can conclude that Bulelani Ngcuka was probably not a spy. What is probably? Adjective. Probably. Because there is no evidence. In common law, we say it in absolute. Is it absolute from instance? Yeah, it's inconclusive. But he was probably a spy. He was probably not a spy. That's why he was released. Many of the ANC comrades were spies. Patricia de Lille said it. In Parliament. I know I'm a born free in 2000. They say, what does that matter? It matters because their DNA is still there. No wonder they take certain decisions. No wonder they don't care about South Africans, because they never cared, from day one. Patricia de Lille one day stood up and said, all ANC MPs were spies. Panuel Maduna stood up. He said, name one. He said, you. And I believe that Cyril Ramaphosa was a spy. I believe Terrell Kota. And in answering back, he didn't make a valid case, to free himself for Ramaphosa. Terrell Kota put it in Parliament, which were arrested. And this guy, he gave us up in an affidavit. His father was a police officer. He said we implanted communist ideas in his head when we were going to Robben Island and I was going home. And then they rewarded him with shares. They gave him a union, a yellow dog union. And then he became a billionaire. And I can tell you, when you are arrested, back in the days, the Afrikaners wanted you to become a spy, to give them information, to confess. He said he did not do all of those things. And it's quite, crazy. The ANC comrades, all of them, Botoni Yengeni, Bomangmang, none of them will tell you that I was tortured. None of them will tell you that they wanted this information. All of them, they went to Robben Island singing hallelujah. Why Stephen Biko was killed? Stephen Biko was killed. Why was he killed? Because he's one of those who did not cooperate. Many of those who did not cooperate, they fell from John Foster Square. Many of the PAC, BCM, they were killed because many of them did not cooperate. If you cooperated, you went to Robben Island singing hallelujah.
I'm listening.
I'm glad that you actually brought in the credibility of the leadership in there. Judge Brett Wanless, the judge that presided over the case of Katiso Molefe, eventually granting him 400,000 rand bail. I believe he's got a dark cloud over him. He was accused of sexual harassment some 14, 15 years ago. Do you think that we should trust such a person who's so much credibility?
Was he convicted? What happened to that case?
The case was slashed.
I cannot speak on that because they'll tell me that, he was never convicted. Same as Jacob Zuma was not convicted on a rape case. There's another judge who was also accused of rape. Cape Town. Yeah, he was friends, Nabowine Mandela. This lady, she said, no, this guy raped her when they were on a trip somewhere. Yeah. So, in such cases, maybe that's why we are waiting for the court judgment at the Constitutional Court, where the burden of proof is going to shift a bit, because there is this case where in rape matters, they say men must also prove to a certain degree, because in a criminal case like rape, it's difficult for women to win those cases, and I sympathize with them because the state must prove its case beyond reasonable doubt, and sometimes there is an issue with consent. And this case, a 20-year-old went to a guy's house. They met on Facebook. The mom dropped this lady. This guy said there's a party, but when he got there, there was no party. And then the guy gave this lady a drink, a soft drink, but I think it was spiked. And then this lady, she said she froze. And then the guy never said, no, there was consent. But he said, like she froze. Now the question was that consent? Was that not consent? Could the guy do more, to make sure that there is a consent? What is the term? Solicit. Yeah, can the guy do more? So that case is going to be the alpha and omega, a way forward, with the guy. I say that a guy must make more effort in making sure there's a rape. If you are with someone, make sure that there's a consent. It shouldn't be left to doubt. So this case is going to clear that. There's so many people who've accused of rape cases. Some they're in parliament. Some, they're legislating laws. Some they're questioning Mkhwanazi, as parliamentarians. There's so many. Some have been arrested for heinous crime. Abogating, they're there. They've been fighting so that they can run the Joburg transport. And they never trust politicians because there is money there, there's tenders, there's whatever. Bridge Street was closed for a long time. They gave this Zimbabwean company money and these guys, they disappeared. And I think that the comrades, they gave this person money intentionally so that they can collect on the other side. They threw a javelin. They know what just run away, go back to Zimbabwe or New Zealand. Here's 20 million. The guy took the money and gone. So where's the money? Because these politicians, they're buying Lamborghinis, Ferraris. They're not buying something productive, unlike the Afrikaners. And when Pegitele calling us Abonono, somebody said, Amabono, they stole 5%. If they stole it all, they did something. We saw schools, even our townships, they developed the infrastructure. The comrades, they steal 100% of the budget, including Cyril Ramaphosa. And the only thing that they do, they're buying soccer clubs. These guys, black so-called billionaire, multimillionaire, they're not doing something of substance or even coming up with schools because they're in control. You feel good, there's a tight grip behind them because some of them, they're linked to these companies. That's why I'm saying we need to know if Rupert funded you, if the Oppenheimers funded you, because if I can come with a shoe company or a soft drink, they will not fund me. You know why would they not fund me? Because they own the value chain of everything. If I'm coming, I'm saying, you know what, I've got a wine. I want to launch this wine. And then you'll find that, Cyril Ramaphosa has got shares, Motsepe has got shares in this company, that company owns this, and then I'm competing with them. The only time that they will find you, if you say, I want to take care of grannies, in an orphanage, they've got arthritis, abused children, there they will find you because it suits their public narrative. It paints them good. Or you want to buy a soccer club, something that doesn't change much of the lives. But if I'm a car, I were to come and say, I want to launch an EV, electric vehicle, or I want to come up with a clean technology, clean energy, I'm competing with Motsepe. They will not fund me. I'm competing with the bosses of Motsepe. So they're not doing us a favor. They're not even building the infrastructure that, we need. I mean, we've seen Abu Zuma and Abu Tabombeki. Kids still strip naked when they go to school because there are no bridges there. And then you hear people, but Kwazam Konto, when a person can come up with a compound next to the pool, Che Guevara will not do that. Yes.
Do you want to ask?
I can ask. Our Motsepe are dying. All the people that the Oppenheimers and the bosses of Motsepe were using are getting very old now, right? What does that mean for the Oppenheimers? For lack of a better word, I'm just going to call all the globalists Oppenheimers, right? The Oppenheimers agenda, who's going to take over it now since Abu Ramaphosa are going? Is it Ramaphosa's children? Is it new black people? Where do you see the country going forward for South Africans, especially your average day layman South African?
I can tell you this. Maybe you have no business worrying about who's going to take care after Motsepe. They will tell you it is none of their business. We've got families who've been running the economy for over 200 years. It moves from one successor to the other. Rothschilds, they've been there for some time. Abu TPS, they've been there for some time. Some they change names, but it's the same people. These guys, they're interconnected. We've got Abu Warbeck, Abu Schiff, the Oppenheimers, I think is Warbeck, Schiff, Oppenheimers, I forgot the others. They own the Bank of England. Most people don't know that the Bank of England is privately owned. Where the Bank of England is called the Square Mile. In England, there is a land in England where this bank sits, the Bank of England. It's more like a country within the city. Even the King of England, he cannot just show up in the Bank of England. He has to apply for a permission, like the Vatican City. This is where all these monies are controlled, privately owned. The Oppenheimers, they're also part of that. Because remember, the Oppenheimers, they've been taking our gold, from years, into England. And they've got shares there. And you cannot just come in. And all these reserve banks, I don't know now. I remember back in the days, countries with the private reserve banks. I told one attorney one day, I said, let us go after the South African Reserve Bank. And he told his wife, Ike said, you must go. I said, you see, feminine age. And the next thing I hear the wife say, woo, banana bakanka benke. What type of a man is this? Because I was saying, let us challenge the private ownership, 600 shareholders in the Reserve Bank. And then, now it became fashionable. People did not know that because I had researched it. I wrote letters to them. But you know what? Why can't I get in there? It's so difficult to get in. Why are we excluded? To be part of the shareholders. They say, no, you're not excluded. You can apply, but another member must sell you. It's optional. It's a willing buyer, willing seller type of affair. But these guys, when they die, there'll be new successors. I mean, some companies, they do die, eventually disappear, some billionaires, but others continue. But if you're not a billionaire, you'll be, you're a pawn.
Just to take you back a little bit, because it was speaking about the conspiracy theories and how they fit into the South African current situation. Now, I need to know, there had been cartels before, your relevant creatures, your Victor Palatsolos, and
Those are small fries.
yeah, listen to me. Now I need to complete this question. I need to know what do you think could be the relations between the current cartel of your so-called Ice Boys as compared to the Victor Palatsolos? Are they a copycat, or they just feel that they need to be territorial and own their?
I can tell you this. Most people, they don't read this thing, or they'll never be taught at school. Your normal world, it operates the same. The dark world and your normal world, they're intertwined. And some of us, we are told that if you start a company, you must have a minimum input, maximum output. It doesn't operate that way. There are some situations where people are taken out because they are competition. They are physically taken out. Like one day, I think it was a CEO of Hyundai, I can't remember, it was an Asian company, went to Botswana. I don't know, he came here, was kidnapped or killed. Some of these things, they don't happen by chance. And sometimes these guys, they hire hitmen who could deal with these guys. Like we've seen now, Abo Ket, they were Abo henchmen, Abo Maumel. Sometimes there are certain deals. We want to buy in your company. We want to take over. Like taxis, there's a terrain war. This terrain war is not only Guma taxis, even in mining, even in pharmaceutical companies. I'll give an example. During COVID, there were financiers and globalists who were benefiting when the country was locked down. And they were making money on my retail, selling their products. There are those who are not benefiting. Sometimes they do clash amongst themselves. The mining industry, for starters, they say, no, we are opening by force. The airline industries, that's another cartel. Now they come into loggerheads. But what must they do? They must meet and make peace. Like the mafias, they see it with the boss of bosses from that side, the boss, and then they mediate. Sometimes they mediate. But these guys, they've got abo henchmen, like abo Vita Poloto, abo La Castranosta, remove this guy. He's problematic. That's why we'll have abo Uban, this guy who was killed. Beguichomi Abumbalula was giving all these ANCs. Is it Brett Cable? Yeah, some of these guys, the dark world is, in line in the normal world. That's why I mentioned the mafias. The mafias, especially in America, the Italian mafias, they found Gucci when they came to America. I mean, this post-World War, Europe is devastated by wars. They're seeking greener pastures. And then they come to America. They find that people have already set up industries. They cannot come in. They flip the table. Then you must find the dark world. You must force your way in. Like Jacob Zuma did. When he came in, he found that Thabo Mbeki solidified deals ngabo BEE. Magathu angapha bathi there's Maxozoma. Magathu angapha bathi there's Tokyo. Magathu where must I go? Then he kicked the door. The same way as we do Madlanga dice. If you've played the game of dice, those who don't have money, when everybody settle my dice in, there's money on the floor, I must cause kukurash. If you don't know, I say poisa. When everybody is confused in that stampede, I grab money. That's how the world operates. Because they will tell you, Uguti, use proper channels. If you don't have proper channels, and these cartels, they say, go get the certificate. You don't have qualifications. They make it tough for you. That's why earlier on, I spoke of industries. People group themselves. They say, you cannot speak about God. You Catholic, go study for 7 years. But before you finish, they've already gone miles. They're ahead of you. And then when you come back, they say, okay, before you start your own thing, to have starting capital, you don't have. These guys are... So other guys, they flip the script. That's why there are wars. And then people will tell you that the pen is mightier than the sword. That's why America has got war. They realize, you know what? If we apply fairness, we're not supposed to take Iraq's oil. We're not supposed to take Gaddafi's oil, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, to use dollar as a currency. They force them to use the dollar. You're selling your oil in $1. They use force. They come in because if all things are equal, America will be at a disadvantage. So this world operate in that way. The one who doesn't have, he forces his way. Or if you don't use force, the lion will not eat. He will say, okay, but why must I kill the springbok? He was brought here by God. So people don't operate that way. And when you tell people, they'll say violence is bad. No, sometimes violence is good. There is good violence. There's good there's bad violence. Like crime. There's good crime, there's bad crime. Like we did crime during apartheid. We told people, as a Spinello Daki, we know our enemies. Because the channels have been closed. What more do I do? What more can I do if they close the channels? People flip the script and they come in. Yes.
Glad that you're speaking of America, and what's your take about the American government shutdown? You're talking about currency right now, and what do you think, and how do you think it affects us as ordinary South Africans?
Down in terms of I'm trying to understand the question, because sometimes they shut down the Congress. Sometimes shut down as in us, tariffs and all that. Yes. When they're using tariffs, you mean that? Look, if I was Donald Trump, I'm running America, and I realize that I'm losing a tight grip. There is BRICS. They want to introduce their own currency, and they are manufacturing their own cars, the EV cars, and I'm losing out. GM Motors is losing out. Factories, iPhone, they're going to Indonesia, they're going to China. What more can I do? I will twist their hand, I will also come up with laws that are in my favor, of which South Africa failed to do that, and they can't do that. Because even if South Africa can say to America, okay, you're introducing tariffs, we've got structural, strategic mineral resources. They can't do that because they don't even own the mineral resources. They are owned by private companies. Abolone Mill, they are not ours. All these, companies. And if you decide to shut down, there'll be a war. They will send in soldiers. We can't even defend ourselves. We'll see American soldiers, Navy, surrounding us. And the next thing, you'll have a new president, who is aligned to them, like a Mobutu Sese Seko, like a Blade Compaore, and business continues as normal. That's what you do in the world. That's why you need soldiers.
I've said this and I've said it again. I know that Traore is a militant president, but do you see his future ending the same way that we know the narrative to end? Being replaced?
But Traore, his future can be secured if he can have allies. The same way as if Zimbabwe had allies when they sanctioned them, and countries were going to come in and say, you know what, fine, America was giving you this, the sanction, we're not going to sanction you, we're going to continue. We are Burkina Faso, we are Senegal, we are continuing business as usual. But these countries, they're also fearing for their own lives because they're indebted to these superpowers. Hence, Gaddafi came in. He was trying to solve that vacuum. Gaddafi said, don't worry, we're going to use a dinar in African currency to use it to circulate amongst ourselves, an African bank, because Zimbabwe is not poor. It has minerals, it has vegetation, but what made them poor, or what makes countries poor, is because dollar is the official currency of the world. If you don't have a dollar, it means you cannot move this book. You want this pen. This pen is here between me and you. This book is here. You say, give me this pen. I said, give me $1 first. Then you keep $1, you move. And the dollar is a paper that is worthless. It's printed that side. And then instead of me doing a barter trade, we're saying, you know what? Okay, I don't have $1. Okay, let's just have our own currency in Africa. We'll use it to shift. Because you can't go maybe to barter trade and change a glass of wine, for a book. Gaddafi was filling that vacuum. And with him, it was even better because he was saying this currency is going to be backed by gold. Unlike the dollar is backed by speculators. They moved away from the gold standard, silver standard. It's a currency that stands on nothing. So back in the days, you knew, even South Africa, our currency was written that for every rand, it's guaranteed with an ounce of gold. If you took 1 rand 2 rands to South African Reserve Bank and say, here's your rand, they needed to give you gold in return, but we moved away from the gold standard. Therefore, this thing doesn't have value. They print. That's why these American guys, they print more money for them, and we can never repay them. There is no amount of money in the world enough to repay the debt, because if I produce 1 rand, I borrow you, I say, here's 1 rand. These reserve banks, they are privately owned. They're not state owned. Kennedy was killed because he wanted to nationalize the bank in America, the Reserve Bank. Lincoln, the same. Andrew Jackson, the same, assassinated. Because he's saying, no, why must we allow a few Zionists to print us money? They borrow the government, and the government, when they give, like here, maybe they give us 1 rand, they say, here's 1 rand. Between a rand, we've got 30% interest. It means they're giving you 70 rand. When you give it back to me, you must give me 1/3. So now this is only 1 rand. I give you 1 rand. I'm making an example. This is 1 rand. I say to you, I'm giving you this rand. You must give it with 30 cents extra. I'm printing money. I say, here it is. Where are you going to get this other 30 cents? It's not there in circulation. I'm the one who prints it. That's why the money in the world that is in circulation, it doesn't cover the interest rate. And I'm saying, I'm giving you 20 rand. The only 20 rand, let's say it's the only 20 rand in the world that exists. Then I say, when you bring it, you must bring it with 30% interest. And I sit, I don't print money. We're going to take it. So what happens in this economy? It's a pyramid scam. They're fighting pyramid scam. You're taking from John, give it to A. That's what happens. If you gave 10 people money, 1 rand, 1 rand, 1 rand, $1, and you say you must repay, one is going to be bankrupt because you are taking from this, paying this one. It's like you're giving people 10 chairs, they sit. You take 1 chair, you said sit. You take 1 chair. Eventually, there's going to be a monopoly. So these guys, they print money. That's why the Rothschild said, I don't care. Uguti, a crown sits on who? Who control the world? Who's the president? Give me the machine that prints the country's money, then I'm done. That's how they've captured Europe. That's how the royal families, they needed money to sponsor these Voyager trips. And these guys, they were behind them. I said, no, go fine. Columbus, go to America, but you owe us, guys. Go find whatever. Oh, the dromedaries. Go. Vasco da Gama. Go. But those ships, they belong to us. Everything, they went in there. So, and until we understand that, with this country, it's owned by multinationals, the lobbyists. These are guys who go to doctors, tell them, go to put this Panado, remove this, take this, and then you think that you've got power. You don't have power. If voting gave you power, they would not allow you to vote. And people would ask, what is the way forward? If I gave you the way forward, so many people, they are not prepared for the solution. A few.
Is it sweet?
Yeah, I'm telling you, if you cannot, come on, you must have a leverage. This system, if you come from the shacks, you vote, and you're fighting against the lobby groups, lobbyists, like BlackRock. You think you're gonna win? If I want a school at a particular area, and Bill Gates comes, he says, give me this land. Who wins? Bill Gates wins because he can take $400 million and bribe all these politicians. He can take R1 billion, bribe them all, then he wins. So they take this using a piece of paper that is worth nothing, and they take the real asset because you want to use the dollar to move, but without knowing what this is a fake economy that they've created. It's a fake currency. That's what happened. So unfortunately, an average man in the street is not prepared for that because they know very well that an average person wants to drink alcohol, wants to drink cognac, is interested in the Slay Queens, is interested in soccer club, interested in UFC, who's winning, Conor McGregor is coming back or not. But all that is sports. And if you go to the history of sports, it was engineered. It's part of social engineering. Back in the days, sports, you did sports at school. When you come out of school, you work. There were no people who were called athletes, 100 meters athlete, professional. There were no professionals. That's why Upele is one of the first superstars. Back in the days, you did boxing at school. Like there are certain games that we used to do at school, like Abo Scotch. And then it ended up Abumkusha. But these guys, the globalists, they realize that you can make money out of this, and then you can intoxicate these guys. Let us make soccer professional. Let us do all these things so that these guys can be intoxicated, and then they come up with that. And the Rockefellers, they introduced public schooling. There was no public schooling before. You only went to school if you're an entrepreneur, you want to invent something. School was a specialized. Many people did not go to school. The economy was on land, you plow, you car, But now these guys, they realize, you know what? They are industrializing the world. Ford needed guys to work. Abu Rockefeller needed people to work because you are now going, into industrialization. Therefore, they take these monkeys, let's bring them to school so that we teach them enough so that they can work for us. That's why in South Africa, KZN is one of the last provinces, to be colonized in that way, in the 1800s, when they've done away in Cape Colony in the 1600s. And then they say these guys don't want to work. Let us kill their cows. Take their cows. Let us take their land so that they can move into Johannesburg. By that time, the British Empire owns Rhodesia, South Rhodesia, which is Zimbabwe, North Rhodesia, Abo Congo, and Abo Zambia. It owns Botswana land, it owns Lesotho, and then they could shift employees, forced labor. South Africans did not want to work. The Zulus in KZN did not want to work. They brought in India because Indian Empire, it was under Britain. They brought in Indian to work in the sugar canes. Some of the people, they brought them from Lesotho, Mozambique to come and work, here, talk to the Portuguese Empire. And then they come here, they work and they rotate employees and they rob them. And some of these people, if you go to Alexander Forbes, probably there are trillions sitting there for people who died. They don't have monies. Yes. So it's the capitalists, the globalists. So we are slaves of the globalists. And until we do something about that, and unfortunately, from time immemorial, even after a revolution, the few elite groups, they take over and they create these commissions of inquiries to distract us. But it's fine. We know certain things, but we will not know more than enough. Hence, these guys will come to the commission that I cannot tell you this. That's why I was mad at Atta Fraser. Atta Fraser went and says Palapal. What is Palapal? And then they say money there, it's even higher than $500,000. They say it's $1 billion. You got it in the Far Eastern countries. And Atta Fraser knew deeper secrets about Cyril Ramaphosa and all other ANC people, but he weaponized information. So these guys in the intelligence, they are weaponizing information. They are releasing information that's suitable for them to fight this candidate A. Like now, they're going to be fighting amongst themselves. Paul Mashatile will be attacking this. Like I don't know whether it's a conspiracy theory or what, where they say this guy from Northwest, I forgot his name, the one who was insisting that is an ANC, Molefe, one Brown. They said it's a conspiracy with Ramaphosa. I don't know whether it's lies.
No, he's very much a member of the ANC.
Yeah, but they say, he lied there, but these guys will be fighting amongst themselves. They'll be using the intelligence. Like we've seen about Billy Masetla when Zuma was fighting Mbeki. Some of the emails were even manufactured. Which this email comes from this. These guys, they can place you in the scene of crime. And they can forge emails and say, you email this, and as if they want you in jail. And the next thing you're in jail. So the conspiracy is deep. I don't know whether it was Henry Ford, who said, if people understood the conspiracy against them, there will be a revolution tomorrow. If they understood how the financiers, Ford was very against the financiers, the Zionist financiers, because sometimes they fight these globalists, which if they knew, people will be fighting tomorrow. There will be a revolution tomorrow. But in South Africa, an average South African, Yeah, an average man in South Africa is drunk. An average man of my age still want to buy slahla, shy convertible, adlabantwana, and then business as usual. So we are not that conscious like before. That's why today you can hardly find a conscious artist like Miriam Makeba, Letambulu. All these artists, they want to sing about alcohol, amapiano, yabantwana. Where is Casper Nyovest? When other issues are affecting us, are they not affected? Where is Somizi? Each time you see these guys, they are dancing. Who is going to be Nina Simone? Who is going to be Harry Belafonte? Everybody can't sing about alcohol. Even Mzwakembuli is quiet. Mzwakembuli, the only time that he comes, he can come 2025 and say, who kills Sikukuni? We say, bugger off. Tell us about now. Who's controlling our means of production? Who's exploiting us? They're not pointing a finger. Miriam Makeba sacrificed a career, stood up there and spoke on our behalf. Brenda Fassie did the same. Sacrificed a career, yes.
Do you think that they started fighting amongst themselves? Because going back to Shadrack Sibiya, he kept on asking that, why are they not arresting me? And why is it that they're not giving me a chance to speak at the Ad Hoc Committee or the Madlanga Commission? And also he's suspended as well, like Mkhwanazi. So it seems like they're still trying to find something to...
These guys, they can frustrate you because depending who's controlling the narrative, sometimes they can deny you the platform. And sometimes they can see, you know what, let's suspend him. Because if he's arrested, remember, when a man has got nothing to lose, he's dangerous. Sometimes they keep you out there. And remember, like about SIU, and some of these accusations go politics, mainly, they don't accuse you to convict you. They accuse you to put a cloud. And then, from there you can't move. Let me give you another example. Thabo Mbeki, he's the one who brought the dirty politics in the ANC during elections. Thabo Mbeki's second term, he was contested. Futhi started ngwani. There's a clip yaku SAPS where Mandela was contested, substituted Tambo. Tambo was created, they created a position for Tambo, national chairperson. And now the question was, who's going to be the deputy? Because Sisulu had said he's resigning. They nominated Thabo Mbeki. Hani stood up. He says, if he's standing, I'm also standing. He pointed, if he's standing, I'm also standing. It became a problem. They brought to Sisulu to join the two of them to become third. Hani declined, and no, Mbeki declined because they said they cannot contest. They are senior. They dealt with them. But the second term Mbeki as a president, not in the ANC, when he was contested by Tokyo, Ramaphosa and Phosa, what did he do? He went to the state security. He accused Tokyo, Ramaphosa and Phosa, they want to kill him. If you remember that. He said there's a conspiracy. There are people, they came and said there are people who want to kill the president. It's these three. And these three, they were popular at that time. And if they continue with contest, it's like, they want to kill him. Then they all declined a nomination. Thabo Mbeki was uncontested. After Thabo Mbeki was elected, a day later, they say, no, these allegations are unsubstantiated. And then by then, Mbeki, he's unopposed. So they do that sometimes to create a cloud. It's like if someone says, no, they accuse of rape. Even if you win, says, but he might have done it. Maybe the technicality. So in politics, accusations, they matter. The image. I mean, Mkhwanazi, if he wanted to be a president, he'll never come back now. Even if they can say he knows nothing, he'll never come back. They dealt with them. Some of them, they are guilty. I'm not saying they are free. In politics, almost all of them are guilty. But others, their wrongs, they're being highlighted so that they stop them. I mean, who's this guy? There's another guy who contested Cyril Ramaphosa. The one was a minister of health. I forgot him. He was involved. They called him Mr. 10%. In the scandals. He lost to not to Ace, the other one from KZN. I forgot. He was a premier of KZN at some point. I forgot his name. He was a minister of health during COVID. Yeah. So that is that. I think I've said more than enough. But just be here for me now. There are so many allegations against him. Yes, social case. Even for he says, lots of things about Sibiya that are not glorious, which is a corrupt individual. I don't know. Maybe they should, charge him so that we see. But if they charge him, maybe he may speak. It strikes me because Sibiya, even you listen to him, go my interviews, he's not a bright person. He's not an intelligent person. No matter akhuluma, you can tell with this one. Yeah, ofana no lento. Ofana no like Montana. They like to talk, they're like women. I'm going to say they're like women. They talk too much. And I remember one lady that I was representing, she said that she was not going to be exposed had Lucky Montana kept his mouth quiet. But now Lucky Montana kept on saying, no, they must come to me. I'm not afraid of them. You can't talk like that if you've been a CIO. No, they must come to me. So Sibiya, he strikes me as the person who would say, if Google be, he'll say, but I was not alone. I was not alone. Why me? And then you don't want a guy like that in the box because it might sacrifice you. But I think I've covered what else that I'm leaving behind. But other than that, you'll see what's going on. But I hope that, the other people who are going to come in, they're going to spill the beans. But unfortunately, in South Africa, we've got this culture of worrying about your career, which how much do I say? That's why I'm saying, you know what? Sometimes they must just spill the beans. You've got nothing to lose anyway. As a country, this one did this, like when Mandla Mandela had a press conference and then he started to talk about his family members. This one is not a Mandela. This one is my aunt. We need something like that. When people talk and say, this one, I don't know why, because since he's not supposed to Mandela, he's a strong one. This one is Ndaba. He's a stepchild of this and this. And the media, they said, hey, that was silly of him. And the South African media, they're saying nothing. And so the South African media has been bought. It's in the pocket of these guys. That's why Cyril Ramaphosa can do no wrong. Cyril Ramaphosa loses no case. You wonder, can Cyril Ramaphosa lose a case? Even on a clear case like the Zulu King, where the Zulu King family, they never met and say we nominate a king. The king was nominated by Ukajab Telezi. Cyril Ramaphosa endorsed that because this guy agrees with them. Nabo Andile Ramaphosa. There's a clip where he was saying, I hope, it's true, because they say Mrs. Zulu was telling Andile Ramaphosa, could you talk to your father so that he can fast track the nomination thing, the confirmation thing. There was that tape before. People ignore that. There were so many things. The media, they cannot report. Even when the guy was insulting a journalist, there's so many things happening. But the main thing in the Zulu King, but anyway, I shouldn't be speaking on the Zulu King, but I'm simply saying that Cyril Ramaphosa can not lose a case, even on a clear cut. I mean, the royal family must sit together and say, we nominate this guy to be our king. In this case, it did not happen. Kajabu Telezi, who's not a direct family member, who's an uncle? A foot is an uncle, foot is like, I'm coining it, because his mother, he's the brother, his mother is the sibling. I think, something like that. But Yena is far away. He's supposed to make decisions in Buthelezi clan. So, but anyway, so it's one of those things. So, but other than that, I think that's where we end for this week. And join me again, Ike, in the house. And peace and out. Yeah, boy.